I'm Melissa Shanahan, and this is the Velocity Work Podcast Live, episode number 131. Welcome, everyone, to Velocity Work Live. We have a super special guest today, Jay Ruane. Very pumped that you were willing to do this. So, hi, Jay.
Hi, how you doing? So good to see you. Unfortunately, we didn't get to spend a lot of time together in St. Louis. There was so much going on, but even a few moments with you was great. So I was looking forward on my calendar to getting to spend some time one-on-one with you today.
Oh yeah, me too, definitely. I have a lot of questions for you, and I thought I would explain first. There's a concept that I've been talking about and focusing on this fall, and the reason I'm going to explain the concept to you is because this will help you understand why I wanted you on the show. Okay. So there is a concept by a man named Jonathan Fields. I heard him explain this, and he's talking about you can apply this to other areas of life, but when you're working on business and when you're building a business, there are 3 stages, and he calls one of them simple grace. One of them is the second stage is the unfortunate middle, and the third stage is complex grace. They're not all necessary. You get to decide how you want to do this, but simple grace is when you're starting up. It's you and an assistant and maybe just you, and you're just cranking, and there's a simplicity to that, and you can make a decent living doing that. But not everybody wants to stay there. And so if you want to move in a direction and grow, in this case, your firm, you have to go through what he calls the unfortunate middle, because you have to introduce complexity into the business and grow and scale. And there's a lot in there, but eventually you can get yourself to the place where you can hire so that people can handle some of the pieces of complexity. And then you get yourself to this stage of complex grace, which is where you can actually step back and experience some grace, even with the complexity and how the business has grown and the scale and all of that. And so it was interesting hearing him talk about it. And I decided on this show, I wasn't interested in talking to people unless they had a taste of or a sense of complex grace, or at least have in the past. And the reason I say have in the past is because, like, the guy that's describing this, he's built many businesses, and he has to go through the unfortunate middle with each one. And then he gets himself to complex grace. And so I loved the concept, and it's actually not easy to find people who have experienced that, or not that there can't be improvement, not that you don't want to grow, but there's a difference between the people I have on this show and a typical law firm owner. And it's not that law firm owners can't get there. They totally can get there in their own way, and it can, but I think everyone is striving for how to have the firm that they want to have, and the space that they want to have, and the life that they want to have. And I don't know if you would say that you've reached this pinnacle, but I do think that you represent that for people. So what are your thoughts?
So I'm close, and I have made very conscious decisions through the life of my firm to sort of get me to the place where I am today. And I've been over the last couple of years. I certainly would have been a lot closer had COVID not hit. Because the thing that's interesting about COVID, well, let me tell you a little bit about my vision for my firm. I grew up with a father who was a trial lawyer, who was a phenomenal lawyer. And I got into the same area that he practiced in, which is criminal defense. I knew right away I was never going to be able to match his skill set in criminal trials, nor did I have the passion for that. I mean, I could do them. I'm fairly good at them. I've gotten my fair share of not guilty verdicts. I just knew that I was always going to be compared to my father if I did exactly what he did. And I didn't really want that for myself. But what I did want to do is get into an area where I could help people, number one, and also to create a lifestyle firm, because I saw the life that he had, which was work all day at trial, come home, have dinner with his family, and dinner, in my house was very important. We always ate together. But then after dinner, he would sit back down at the dining room table, have a pot of tea, maybe a cookie or two, and then he would work until he went to bed. And I would be doing my homework. I'd come downstairs. A big deal for me was to make his pot of tea every night. But I did not want that. I thought maybe I was just lazy. Like I didn't want to work the amount of work that he did. But it wasn't laziness because I didn't want to do the work that he wanted to do, but I have no problem doing the work that I want to do late at night. So what I set out early on to do was to create sort of a lifestyle firm that allowed me to break away from the firm, allowed me to avoid doing the things I don't like to do as we scaled, but also gave me a much more free time and much more financial security than he ever had. I mean, he was living sort of feast or famine as a criminal trial lawyer. You wait for the money to come in, then you spend it. And I wanted more predictable revenue because I like nicer things. Money is a motivator for me, unlike my father. My father is like a Picasso or a Michelangelo. You know, give him some paints and a canvas and he won't come up for air. He won't eat. He just loves to sit and do his thing. Whereas I like to go to the Ritz-Carlton and go to the spa with my wife and have massages and eat 5-course meals and that type of thing. So I need money to be able to do that. But I set out early on to say, you know, more important than that money was if and when I do have kids. I started having kids later than many. I didn't start till I was 36. That I wanted to be able to spend time with them. And all throughout this, I had been saying to my father, who was my partner, to my other contract partners that I have, to employees, the long-term employees that have been with me, is that, you know, you're not going to make $1 million a year working at my law firm. It's just not going to happen. But you'll have dinner with kids every night. You'll be able to take off and go to things like Little League or dance recitals, or, you know, you want to volunteer in the school, you'll be able to do that. We'll make that work for you. And the long-term employees that have been with me have really appreciated that. And unfortunately, I did a bad job with communicating that to some employees and taking care of them so that they left. And that was probably my unfortunate middle. I had a lot of churn, a lot of turnover when I had trained people, and it was a compensation issue because the revenue wasn't there. It was a management issue because I don't really like to manage people. And so, you know, but all along I've been striving to build the firm that I have today. And as of last week, I'm sort of elevating myself to a CEO role, really rarely getting involved in any of the day-to-day operations. And we're going to see how that goes for the near future.
It's so awesome. I'm so excited for you. And because it feels like you're built for it. Just what I know of you and the conversations I have gotten to have with you, feels like you're about to shine.
I hope so. And I mean, the reality is, for me, is, you know, sort of, I've had a sense of what I want my vision to be. And I've been working towards it. And now that it's within reach, I have to almost, you know, acknowledge that it is within reach, and I don't have to work, you know, I still have to work at it, but I don't have to work as hard to get to that point. And now I have to say, okay, that was your vision, dude. Now you need to live that vision.
Yes.
Because you built to get you this far, you know, and I'm doing that fully cognizant of the fact that 10 years from now, my vision may change. So I'm knocking on the door of being 50. When I'm knocking on the door of being 60, I may say, I want back in. I want to try cases again because, you know, my kids are grown at that point, and that type of thing. So it's really about establishing your sort of a manageably, you know, a vision that's manageable in the near term, and going for that, knowing full well that you can modify that vision. But really, there's an overarching idea that I want a firm. I want a career that sort of supports the things that I want to do.
Yeah. I'm sure so many people listening to this identify with that. I think that, well, actually, something I really appreciate that you said, because no one said it as explicitly as you just said it, but I'm in that camp, is that money does matter to me. Like, money is a motivator to me, and not because I think at some point I made the switch, and it was probably more gradual than I realized. But at some point it flipped to where all the stuff I had around money, like, well, if you have a lot of money, that there's some sort of sense of greed, or there's some sort of sense of selfishness with that. But here's what I've come to learn is that we are here to enjoy and play in life, and different things light different people up. To me, also going to the Ritz to have a massage and going to stay at a really awesome place in the mountains and those kinds of things, it takes money. And that's the kind of stuff that I want to do. And of course you can give more of yourself to the world if all that's taken care of. And so I don't know. I love the way that you were just like, money is a motivator. I agree. And it's not the end all be all. And I don't get to the money by any means necessary, but it's a motivator for how I want to think about what I'm building. And I'm hoping that everybody, like people listening here that can identify with you and maybe with what I'm talking about too, just own it, man. Like I think you get there faster and you use your brain better if you do.
Yeah, it's difficult for me. I grew up in an inner city area. Didn't have a lot of money. I mean, I didn't go without food. I had, both parents worked. We did take a vacation every year. I'm not about to cry that I had a poor childhood because I didn't. That's not what I'm saying. But I also know that there are certain things that I wanted to do that I couldn't do because the money wasn't there. And I wanted to get to a point where money really is an object, and it's interesting to me. And this is a challenge that I have as a parent now, because a couple of weeks ago I went to a couple of months ago I took my kids to a Yankee game. A couple of weeks ago I took my kids to a Jets game, and both times we were in a luxury suite. Now, both times we're in a luxury suite because I have a connection who has a friend who had I was big early on in my life in networking and developing relationships. And those relationships have gotten me wonderful experiences that I wouldn't be able to afford otherwise. So it's not always just about cash money, but it's about the wealth you get from being interconnected with people. And I've worked on that. And so I've been able to take my kids to these wonderful things. And it was interesting. I took my kids to a basketball game this past weekend, and they were wondering why, they were like, well, are we going to sit in a box? And I'm like, no, it's just going to be a regular basketball game. And they're like, well, we really would want to sit in a box. And I'm like, yeah, so did I. But at 8 years old, I wanted to sit in a box. I had never done it. I didn't do it till I was in my 40s. And you guys got to do it early on in your life. So it's all down here from here, kids. I don't know what to tell you. You got to work hard to get to where you're at. But that's a struggle I have as a parent is to make sure that I light that fire of hunger inside my kids, because they're getting stuff that I could only have dreamt about when I was their age. And so I have to try to find a way to balance that and make sure that they appreciate what it is that they get, because by their byproduct of being related to me. Because when I go to a Yankee game now, I like being in the luxury suites or in the nice seats. I don't want to sit in the nosebleeds. I've done that. I've been there. I've done that. And that's not a lifestyle I want anymore. I'd rather go to one game a year in great seats than go to 15 in the nosebleeds. I used to do 15 in the nosebleeds, and those days are behind me now. Maybe I'm just old and grumpy.
Yeah, that makes so much sense to me. And that's something I haven't had to think of yet. I also had kids later in life. So I have one's about to turn 2. And this is going to be a challenge that I haven't thought through yet. But
it's funny. I talked to a friend of mine, and he's like, the best person for this is Shaquille O'Neal. Whenever he flies with his family, he sits in first class with his wife, and he puts his kids in the last row of the plane and coach. And they're like, but why do we have to sit in the back, Dad? We're rich. And he goes, no, I'm rich. Yeah. You're not rich. I'm rich. You're getting a free seat anywhere on the plane. Middle seat, last row. That's free. That's where you sit. So,
that's amazing.
Yeah.
I feel like you need to come up with a course. Like, get this under your belt. Then you can spit out a course for how to lessons that you can adopt as a parent.
Yeah, maybe that may be something I can fill with my free time now.
Yes, exactly. Well, okay. I would love to go back. Many people do know your story, but if you could just share
Sure.
The firm that you have now, was that your first business?
Well, what do you define as business?
Well, it could have failed. That's still a business. Well, I don't know what you mean.
So, my first business was at 14.
Okay.
It was not necessarily the best business to be in, but like I said earlier, I grew up in an inner city area. And I went to sort of an exclusive all boys prep school in the next town over, Fairfield Prep. But I grew up in Bridgeport. I rode the bus from Bridgeport with the other kids from Bridgeport. And what I knew at Fairfield Prep was that the kids who lived in the rich suburbs wanted Playboys, but they didn't have the ability to get them. But the guy at the corner store bodega in Bridgeport had no problem selling 14-year-old Jay a $5.95 Playboy magazine. So my first business was buying Playboys in bulk and reselling them at my high school to 14 and 15-year-old boys for $30, $40, and $50 a pop.
Wow.
That was my first business. I found the demand, filled the demand, and it wasn't necessarily. I mean, this was back in the 80s, so this is a long time ago. The market's probably a lot different now, but that was my first business where I was hustling, making money.
Wow.
And so from there, it just I guess I've always sort of found the prurient interests of suburban white folk, because then I became a DUI defense lawyer and catered to them that way when they had their foibles getting arrested. So that was my first business. And then I hustled my way through college. I had won an award from a local bank. I used my connection to the local to the bank to get a job as a summer teller for a couple of years. Then I went out and worked at a law firm in college and in law school, and I bartended and hustled at night doing that type of thing. So that was really sort of everything I did. And then became a public defender, sort of like a daily public defender for $100 a day for my first 2 years of practice. And then I hung a shingle, and a few months later joined up with my father. So that's sort of how I became something. But, I was always a hustler type of guy. I was the kind of guy who in college tried to know as many people as possible. Whenever there was a party, I was one of the first people called because I could rally a bunch of students to come to a house party and that type of thing. Personal networking was always important to me, and developing relationships with people. So that's really been my strength and helped me grow this business.
Okay. Yeah. So your father had his own firm.
Yes.
And that's what you joined after you did public defender work.
So what happened is that he had a firm. It was a firm like many people have, where he had a partner. He did criminal. His partner did civil. They shared expenses. They each ate their own, whatever they killed. It was really sort of a firm in name only. They didn't share books or anything like that. And I came out, and he had no work to give me. So he went ahead and said, hey, I'll make a connection for you to the public defender's office. I started hustling there. But I would hustle the hallway because I could at that time. And, people knew my father, and they might throw me a case that they didn't want for $500 or $1,000. So I was hustling the hallways. And then I got into a beef with my supervisor because I got passed over for a permanent job. And I quit on the spot. And then I went to my father and said, hey, I just quit. And he goes, well, good luck with that. What do you want me to do about it? I'm struggling to make my payroll every week. There's no job here for you, but there's a desk over in the corner. And if you remove the phone books that have stacked up over years, you can sit there and there you go. So that I kind of hung my own shingle, and I started actually developing business. And then when he and his partner had to renew their lease, his partner wanted to buy, he wanted to lease. And so they kind of just split up. And that's when my father and I joined together and started this firm. Okay.
What year was that?
So that was in 2000.
Okay.
In September of 2000.
So once the split happened, did you, I guess what I'm curious about is, you get in there, you clear off that desk, you're going to sit at that desk. You're essentially building a firm from scratch. It's not like, So then I guess I would love to know what that first year or two was like. Like what what was it like in terms, like, how did you drum up the business? And you probably relied on your relationships, but how did you drum up the business? And how quickly did you get to the place where you were cranking?
It took a while.
Mm.
So the story goes something like this. So I hang the shingle in June of 2000. And so June of 2000, I'm out on my own and I'm trying to make it work. I was starving. I stopped paying my student loans and just let them go and just accumulate and accumulate. And I don't recommend that for anybody, but I didn't have the money at that time to pay them. And so I was just ignoring them. I was living hand to mouth most of the time. If I would catch a $500 case or a $1,500 case that was going to make my car payment or my rent at the time, I'm not embarrassed because it was, my life. I luckily had a personal network of a lot of bartenders, people that I had worked with. And when you're 25 years old and single and trying to make it as a lawyer and you have no money, I would go to the bars that my friends were bartending at, and they would, oh, somebody returned this cheeseburger, here you go. Why don't you have it? And here's a couple of beers on the house type of thing. And so I would sit at the bar and talk to them and eat a dinner. And I would talk to the guy next to me and pass out my business card and that type of thing. I know my friends, I'm sure they put bacon on a burger and sent it to the table when the person specifically said no bacon, so that there was an extra burger that they could just give to me because they were taking care of me. And I still have those relationships to this day. I still talk to those guys regularly. In fact, one texted me while we were on this call. So those guys kept me fed. I had a bunch of roommates. I was driving an old beat up car. There were plenty of nights where I was filled with doubt saying, was I crazy? Why did I do this? I mean, I've taken on all this debt. I'm not making money. I'm not nearly, what I thought a lawyer would be. I mean, I went to school with the promise of you get out of school, you get this job, you get paid a lot of money, and it's going to be awesome. It just didn't happen for me. So it took a while of grinding and making relationships and studying the craft and getting better in a particular niche that I was able to sort of exploit in my state and develop a name for myself in the DUI defense niche, moving from general criminal to DUI. I spent a lot of time at seminars getting better at that, so I knew more than the next person. And then going to those seminars, I got to talk to other lawyers and find out what worked for them in marketing and what didn't work. The DUI defense community was really aggressive early on with internet marketing because, you get arrested for DUI. It's not something you want to talk about. So a lot of people went online. So I kind of rode the wave of the early internet, and that helped a lot. And it took me probably 10 years before we had myself, my father, and two other lawyers. And then it was really probably about 2006, 2009, in that range where things really started to hum. So it was a long slide. It was a lot of years of, really trying to figure out how we were going to survive with business till we got into a place where we were comfortable generating, $1 million a year that could support all the people that we had employed.
Mm-hmm. What prevented you from going to join a firm where you knew you'd get a paycheck and you could get work?
Well, it's interesting. I knew I wanted to do criminal defense coming out of law school because it's really, I knew I didn't fit in with civil firms, even personal injury firms. I just don't have the personality. I'm more of a street lawyer, kind of get along guy. I don't really like lawyers. I don't like talking to lawyers. I don't like talking to pretentious people. And a lot of people are impressed with themselves that they went to law school. I'm more likely to talk to a local drug dealer than I am a lawyer. And just knowing the people, I gravitate towards hustlers and that type of thing. Yeah. So when I first got out of law school, it was interesting. I got the list of the Criminal Defense Lawyers Association, and I sent my resume out saying, you may know who my father is. I'm looking for a job in criminal defense. I'd love to be able to work for you. And I got 100 rejection letters. Nobody was hiring at the time. Nobody. It was 98. There was a legal recession back then. And I got some really nice rejection letters. Like, I wish I could give you a job. We've already hired. We've got an associate for a couple of years. It's not going to happen. And I remember giving a speech 3 years later to the criminal defense lawyers organization at a seminar where they brought me in to teach them about advanced DUI techniques, because I had started to make a name for myself and I was doing things. And I started my speech saying, it's nice to be here. There's so many great people in this room. And I called them all out. And I say, you probably are wondering why I called on all these people. I have rejection letters for all of these people when I begged them for a job 3 years ago. And now here I am teaching you how to do your job better. So I guess you lost out on a chance to have a great lawyer working for you, but I'm doing it on my own now. Wow. So I think I would make a terrible employee. And at the end of the day, I am not a good employee. I do things my own way. I do it when I want to do it. I'm terrible at following the systems in our office. I have to constantly force myself to do it because I'm a rule breaker, I guess is I don't fit in really. I think that's the main thing is I don't really fit in anywhere. And I fit in the most at my firm, but there are plenty of days where I look at myself and I look at this law firm that I've created and I'm like, man, I really don't even fit in here. I got to find my place in the world.
Yeah. I mean, that's the reason I asked you that, like, when it's tough and it is a grind and you're hungry and you wish you could make your payments and all of that. I think, I don't know that it's uncommon for people to be there at least for some period of time when they're starting up. And it's so tempting to get yourself out of that scenario because it's so uncomfortable and you can't see that far in front of you. Like, what you want to create, but you can't even tell if you're doing it right, whatever that means. Right. So it's the discomfort. People will just scoot because there isn't a sense of certainty that they want. But for you, it seems like the sense of certainty was there was more certainty for you doing your own thing, even if you hadn't cracked that nut, because you didn't belong over there. You knew you didn't belong there. And so you were going to have to carve out your own thing, and there wasn't another way you were going to do it.
Yeah. I mean, I think for me, I think there's a lot of solos who are hanging on in the criminal defense field, certainly in the PI field, thinking, I just need that one case. That one case is gonna make everything better for me. That one case will come in, I'll be able to work it, I'll make $100,000 or $1 million, and then everything is gravy after that. And I held on to that for the longest time. I thought, okay, this is the way I need to do it. If I just hold on, I can make it. And I just knew that I had the benefit of seeing that, being a lawyer is a long career. And there are ebbs and flows, and maybe I was in an ebb period early on. But if I just kept my head down and kept working, I was gonna achieve something. I had a lot of lucky breaks. I worked really hard. I mean, you work 7 days a week. 25 hours a day. That's what you do when you're trying to run your business. And I tell people that you have the side. What you have to think about if you're gonna do this is that you have the side hustle of being a lawyer, but your full-time job is running a law firm. And the side hustle is getting you to be able to afford to have your real job of running a law firm. And so you just really need to say, it's going to take me a long time to get where I need to be, but it's worth it because that's what you really want. I wanted the flexibility of being self-employed. I wanted the security of knowing I had revenue that was going to come in on a weekly basis by the types of cases that I was doing. I didn't want the sort of lifestyle of a PI lawyer that works a case for 18 months or 3 years before they get a payoff. I like, cash coming in every week. That's the kind of lifestyle that I like, and it has helped me get to my point. And am I going to get those bell ringing verdicts that a PI lawyer gets? No, I'm not. But that's the life I've chosen, and I'm okay with it because I have other things going for me that they don't have. So, it's you have to know what you want and what you're willing to give up to be able to achieve the type of law firm that you want.
Yeah. Yeah. So, okay. So you started humming maybe at 6 or 7 years. And well, actually, wait, one more thought that I just want to share with you, because I don't know if you have thoughts on it or not. Everybody, what I've noticed is we talk a lot about playing the long game, not the short game. And everybody that I notice that I end up having on this show, they all play the long game. No one is in it for quick wins. I mean, maybe here, but you know what I mean? Like, you're going to build what you want to build. You are in it for the long haul. You're playing the long game. And that sounds like that it made me think of that as I was listening to you talk, that's the game you're playing. Like, you knew what you wanted. Yeah.
I know what I wanted. I mean, I knew I was going to be a lawyer for 50 years. So I don't need to make all of my money in year 2. I'm not a manufacturer who's making a widget that someone's going to take to overseas and rip off or improve upon. My brain is what I can sell, right? So, if I get into a pattern where I'm getting a steady number of cases, I can ride this, and you increase your profitability per case, you increase your case volume, you can do all of those things so that you are able to really get to where you want to be systemically. And that's what I was able to do. So I don't think I built myself a job because I don't have to do the grunt work anymore. I could, I could tomorrow. I could say, closing my office, I'm firing everybody, and I'm going to take 2 cases a week, and I'm going to charge $10,000 a case or whatever. And we've got 100 leads coming in a week. I could find some people that'll pay me on the high end. And I could survive that way if I wanted to still be in the daily grind of being a lawyer. But I don't really find pleasure in that anymore.
That's simple grace.
People like that who never did it, right? I mean, he's still undefeated. He had his one trial, of a speeding ticket or whatever it was. I did the grind of being a lawyer. I did it for 15, 16 years, getting verdicts. I lost 17 trials in a row at one point. And that weighs on your soul. So I have the chops. But I also know that, I don't have to do the same thing for my entire career. I could start off as a bartender. Then I could be a lawyer for a couple of years. Then I could be a trial lawyer. Then I could be a law firm owner. And I could be a marketing agency. Then I could be a coach for people. I could do a lot of things. I don't have to stick with one thing just because I have a JD. I can always go back to it. And so that's the path I'm choosing right now.
Yeah. So great. Okay. So 6 or 7 years you were humming, and then you ended up getting a couple of associates so by 10 years, there were 4 attorneys.
Yeah.
You mentioned that there was a point in your journey where if you had to point to it and say, that's the unfortunate middle, like, you could do that. What are some of the biggest lessons that came out of it? Like, you won't repeat something because of what you went through. Because of how you handled it, because of how you operated. Like, what are the biggest lessons learned, either for you and how you operate, or how business works and how something needs to be handled?
So my story includes a really unfortunate time, 2002, 2005-ish, where I was in practice with my father. He had a successful general criminal practice and for years had represented a number of people, including some people who the feds were looking at. And when he was representing a gang leader, he needed to get some information about some people who were described in a police report that were blacked out. So they knew the make and model of the car, they knew the house, but the name of the person was blacked out in the police report. And so he went to this gang leader and said, hey, I'm trying to figure out who these witnesses are. Who can I talk to who's still on the street that might be able to identify these people that are going to testify against you, because that's important information from a defense lawyer's perspective. So that one gang leader told him, well, there's another gang leader that you've also represented that might be able to help, and we have a good friendship. So he helped me out. So my father went and saw the other former client and said, hey, look, I'm going to give you these papers. Take a look and see if you can figure out who these people are, right? Well, unbeknownst to him, that second gang leader was also under investigation by the FBI. When the FBI arrested that second guy, they found all of this paperwork from my father's file and a letter to the gang leader saying, hey, can you help me out identify these people? So even though there was no rules prohibiting the disclosure of that information, there was no protective order or anything like that, the FBI created an investigation into my father. And in order to extricate himself from the crap he was facing, that second gang leader said, oh, by the way, Jim Ruane asked me to kill somebody, and I did it. And so my father became the target of a murder for hire prosecution, which essentially eviscerated our criminal practice at the time. This was in 2002 through 2005, because once you become the target of a federal investigation, you have to, number one, every client has to sign off on the fact that they know their lawyer is under federal investigation. They know their lawyer, is facing life in jail. They know and they're waiving all of those defects. Well, that sort of destroys a criminal practice, because nobody wants to hire the lawyer who they think might sell them out. And nobody wants to have the lawyer who is otherwise focused on his own life and career and protecting that. So we went from a burgeoning criminal defense business to the phones didn't ring for 6 months. So I already went through an experience of COVID back in the early 2000s, where the phones dried up, the business went away. And that's when I did that pivot into DUI, because number one, they were conflict-free cases. There were no co-defendants. And number two, they were suburban people who weren't necessarily reading the newspapers or on the street to hear about the issues with our office. Fast forward, 5 years, the feds close the investigation and say, yeah, nothing's happened here. You were not part of this murder investigation, this murder for hire. We're going to let this thing go. But in the meantime, my father, spent his entire retirement fund on defending himself. We lived off of some of it for a while because we had no money coming in. So it was a real challenge for us to get through that unfortunate middle, I guess you could say, and really sort of build back a practice from nothing. I had a girl I was dating break up with me over it. Like she couldn't, all right, I'm much better now. My wife is amazing, but when you're 26, 27, 28 and you're going through that stuff, and you're thinking, what the hell did I get myself into? I should have just been a stockbroker like all of my friends. Who knows where we can go, but the unfortunate middle teaches you to appreciate what you've actually accomplished looking back in retrospect. I mean, I built a firm up from the ashes, and one that is still well respected, and we still do great things, and we've done great things for a lot of people who really needed an advocate. We've walked multiple people out of jail on life sentences by overturning their convictions. We've created some case law that's very favorable to defendants across the state of Connecticut because we have worked hard at it. Money is a motivator, but it's not the only motivator. Sometimes I like to stick it to the man. Sometimes I just want to help people, and that's really the most important thing. So that it's a lot to get to the point where I am today.
Yeah. And without those trials, it's hard to appreciate really what success feels like. Because if it's just what like you don't ever have the bumps, then or the valleys, then how are you supposed to even know what a peak is? Like you're always
absolutely
cruising and smooth. It's weird if someone doesn't have trials, but that's a biggie. That's a good story now. I'm sure now that wasn't then.
Now. Yeah,
Well,
you need, the reality is, and I've said this before in other presentations, is that nobody goes to Disneyland to ride the tram around the parking lot. That thing that just goes around, don't really do much. People go to Disneyland for the roller coasters, and the roller coasters require you to have a down to get an up, and you got to go around some sharp curves, and you got to hold on and grit your teeth and get through the next dip. But it's what makes this all worthwhile, because if I wanted to pick one of those lives of just the same thing day in, day out, no exhilaration, I could have done that, but it's just not who I am. But there's a lot of people who love that. They love the security. They love buying the timeshare and going to the same place every year, the third week in January. That ain't me. But if it's you, God bless you. Live your best life. I'm all about that.
Yeah. Yeah. No, fair. I have a good friend who is wildly successful, and she has this thing. She says it's always 50-50. Life is always 50-50. It doesn't matter how much money you make. It doesn't matter. It's different, and your perspective changes and all that. But like half the time you're frustrated and dealing with things you don't want to be dealing with and annoyed. And then half the time you're super pumped and blissful about all the things that are happening. And I think it's interesting to think about. I think people assume that success is going to make your life happier. And it's part of life. You're going to experience things that you weren't expecting that are not fun. And I guess the better you get at managing those things, those times, the faster you can move through them and get on with it.
You're gonna experience them. That's gonna happen no matter what. And it really becomes.
I don't know. Everybody's gonna experience the FBI raid. Holy heck!
Yeah, but you know what? I mean, other people experience. Their parents dying of COVID, right? I didn't have that.
Totally.
I mean, that's it's interesting. Whenever a tragedy happens, like there's a school shooting or something like that, I think to myself, wow, I haven't experienced that. I don't know what that's like, but there are things that I've experienced. My uncle Kevin died of AIDS in 1987. He was one of the first 100 people diagnosed with AIDS in California in the mid 80s. And he did all sorts of. So I have that personal experience that other people don't have. Today, we're taping on World AIDS Day. That's why it came to mind.
Oh yeah.
And so it's been. I mean, it's been a long time since my uncle Kevin has been around, and I miss him. I think about him. I think about him often. But that's my life journey, and my life journey is going to be different from your life journey.
Yes.
But the reality is that we have to find the pleasure where we can, because there's plenty of opportunity for pain. So if you can find the pleasure points and hold on to them, whether it's enjoying a hot cup of coffee in the morning as the sun rises, or a late night, movie with your friends where you're laughing your ass off, run to it, grab it, and go for it.
Yeah. Oh, that's a good quote. I like that. But there's plenty of opportunities for pain, so you got to grab the pleasure point.
I mean, quite frankly, if you spent your entire day, you could spend your entire day thinking about all the things that make you miserable. You get nothing done, and it would fill your day every day, all day. So. I say try to avoid that. These are the problems of the living. I'd rather be on this side of the grass than the other, and just try to be optimistic, because it could always be worse.
Yeah. Do you also, I think, kind of pointed to the unfortunate middle when you're talking about like turnover with your team or your staff, so that chapter, whatever that was like for you, what came out of that? What did you change, or how do you think differently because of what you went through?
So, I have a very systemized practice, and we have methods that people are supposed to handle their cases. And because of that, and because of the type of law that we do, our margins are on the lower side. So, I can hire people right out of law school, give them great training in how to do things, but I haven't always been quick to accelerate their raises because, money was tight, and I'd rather spend it on building the business than the employees. And a number of employees have left because they've been able to work at my firm for 6 months or a year and then jump to another firm for, you know, a $25,000 raise because now they have all this experience that they didn't have coming into me. And so I've recently started over the last couple of years reevaluating my compensation plan, because when I have somebody good, I don't want to lose them anymore. And I want to have the stability. Whereas before, when I was in the practice more, I was just, you know, okay, so we're losing that person that covers that courthouse. No problem. I got it. Dump it on me. I'll take care of that courthouse 2 or 3 times a month. And I don't have to worry about them leaving. Now, in retrospect, there are some people that I wish I had kept around. That, you know, when people would come to me and leave, I'd say, all right, that's cool. See you later. You know, I'll find somebody else to fill your shoes. But, you know, that isn't necessarily conducive to building a firm that can grow on. You sort of max out when you have so much turnover. You max out what you can do with your firm because you're constantly plugging the holes in the boat. You're not able to actually direct where you want the boat to go.